Hello and a very warm welcome to Gradeup. I am Shailender Singh, and guys, the topic for today is all about PM SVANidhi Yojana, a very important scheme which was launched by the government earlier this year, and it is very important for us, especially for your exam. So this is what we are going to discuss today. I welcome you all to Gradeup once again. A very good evening, everybody. So guys, this scheme is particularly important because it is basically for the marginal people, and as such a very important initiative by the government under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, and that is why we are going to discuss all the details and facets and nuances about this scheme. So I hope you guys are prepared for that. Now, what is the news? The news is that the Pradhan Mantri Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, that is PM SVANidhi scheme, has been launched for providing affordable loans to street vendors. This scheme was launched by the government on June 1, 2020. This is the date that it was launched, and you can see from the name itself, the entire name which says the Pradhan Mantri Scheme Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, that is basically it is targeting the street vendors, a section that was hitherto ignored by and large by the governments, and in the mainstream discourse also, street vendors are by and large they are neglected as far as the policies and the laws and the schemes are concerned for them, but they happen to be a very important segment for sustaining the commercial activity, and otherwise a lot of important role is played by these street vendors, and this is why the government has brought out this scheme for them. Now, before going forward, before delving into the nuances, guys, I have a question for you first, and let's see whether you're in a position to handle this question. And even if you're not, by the end of this session, you would be definitely in a position to handle this question. So let's check out your knowledge regarding the scheme, which is which of the following statements regarding PM SVANidhi scheme are correct. So you have two statements out here. The scheme is a central sector scheme and fully funded by the Ministry of Finance. So this is the first statement, and the second statement says the scheme is available to all the street vendors engaged in vending in urban areas as on or before March 24, 2020. So March 24, 2020 being the cutoff date. You have four options A, B, C, D, and you will have to identify the correct one. Vishnu Shivaji, a very good afternoon to you as well, and good afternoon to Shri. Just try whether you can answer this or not. So just make some sort of calculated guess, not very random guess, tukkabazi, but I would want to see whether you guys can handle this question. So what could be the probable answer to this question? Alright, no worries guys, this is what we are here for. So none of you has been able to answer this, so we will see towards the end of this session. In fact, I'm going to ask you this question again, and I'm sure that by then you would be in a very firm position to answer this question very effectively. Alright, so let's talk about some of the facets of this scheme. Yes, so there is some answer coming up. Alright, so Vishnu says A and UPSC motivation says B. Alright, so I would disclose the answer towards the end. In fact, by that time you yourself would be in a position to answer it very easily. Alright, so guys, let's talk about the agenda. Why the need for PM SVANidhi scheme? What is the need? Why did the government come up with this scheme on 1st of June 2020? Now the need is that there are approximately some 50 to 60 lakh street vendors in the country. So this is indeed a very huge figure, and probably it could be much more than this. So approximately it could be in this range or maybe a little higher. And these street vendors are mostly concentrated in the metropolitan cities of Delhi, Calcutta, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and other cities also. You know, naturally they are a very important and integral part of the urban life and cultural sphere and commercial life also. And approximately 14% of the informal urban employment is contributed to this thing by street vending. So street vending happens to contribute 14% to the urban informal employment, which is indeed a very big number that we have over here. And guys, you know that COVID pandemic has adversely impacted the livelihood of a big chunk of Indians and has pushed a lot of Indians into poverty. And that is why the government particularly came up with this scheme so as to target this particular segment whose livelihood has been very severely impacted because of the restrictions that followed the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, a lot of restrictions were put in by the government, and they were essentially required because we needed to restrict the spread of COVID pandemic, and that is why their livelihood was impacted very badly and they had to stay indoors. And street vendors, they have a very small capital base. They don't have these large sums. They are not entrepreneurs like big entrepreneurs, and they don't have a large amount of money so that they can afford to sustain themselves. And whatever the small capital base they have, that is generally taken on loan at high prices, at high rates from informal sector, at exorbitant rates. And whatever the sum, the saving, their capital base, their working capital might have been, that would have been consumed in the course of this lockdown, because the lockdown, you know, it has extended for a very long duration now, and we never know that when the normalcy would return entirely until the vaccine comes. So that is some time away, and that is why the government was compelled to take this step so that the street vendors, their livelihood could be restored. And how their livelihood could be restored, that would be through providing working capital through formal banking channel to help them resume businesses. So this is the formal banking channel, not through informal means, because you know that informal means have this high rates, interest rates. So like the money lenders, the local money lenders or Bania or XYZ, so they charge much higher than the formal banking channel. And this is why the government thought that we need to keep the interest of this vulnerable section in mind. A lot of them, they were pushed into poverty. So basically it's also a sort of poverty alleviation program if you look at it that way. So naturally you are trying to restore their lost livelihoods or whatever their working capital might have been. All right, so let's talk about some of the features of this scheme. Now guys, first important thing is that this scheme is launched by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So you know now that which ministry is launched this scheme, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, because street vendors, they are a very integral component in the urban landscape in cities, in towns, and that is why it essentially comes under Housing and Urban Affairs. Urban Affairs की ministry के अंदर आता है. As for the credit limit, now what is important for us to know is what is the credit limit. कितना credit limit है? That is up to 10,000, which is repayable in monthly installments within a year. So एक साल के अंदर return करना है, which has to be returned in monthly installments, and you can have this working capital of 10,000 rupees. Because उनको बहुत ज़्यादा capital की ज़रूरत नहीं होती. You might consider it as a small sum, but for those vulnerable sections that sustain themselves by hawking, by street vending, they are like local theli walas, they are called like रेडी वालास, अलग अलग नाम से अलग अलग जगह पे बोलते हैं इनको, and they don't require a very large capital. A small capital of 10,000 rupees is just about enough for them to be able to revive their business, right? So this is the credit limit. Second fact is that no collateral would be required, because generally what happens is for any loan that you want to avail through the formal banking channel, you require collateral, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of the vulnerable sections, a lot of the lower middle classes and the poor class that is not able to access the formal banking channel because of the need for collaterals, because not everybody has the assets to show collateral, and that is why the loan does not require any sort of collateral. Then there would be no penalty on early repayment of loan. So no penalty on early repayment of loan, because generally what happens is that if you make early repayment of loan, in some of the banks what they do is they charge you something for that, they penalize you, because the bank is essentially foregoing on the profit margins that would be occurring by virtue of interest. So अगर आपने पहले ही लोन दे दिया तो उनको उतना इंटरेस्ट नहीं मिलेगा, and that is why some of the banks, they would be penalizing you for early repayment of loan, and it is not very encouraged. But here you don't have to get penalized. The vendors would not be penalized on early repayment of loan. So another very important fact related to this particular scheme. Guys, please pay attention to each one of these facts, because we are going into details, because UPSC does ask into details these days, is asking those questions into detail. So scheme का basic नहीं पूछ रहे, it is also essentially getting into the depths of the scheme and is asking questions. So please make sure that you have all those facts in place, so that before the exam you can maybe revise them, and you can effectively deal with any question that UPSC asks you regarding this particular scheme or any particular scheme. So आपको थोड़ा detail में करना पड़ेगा. Alright, and I also do hope that you guys have liked this session, and also please subscribe to Gradeup IS channel. Those of you who are coming to this channel for the first time, please do that so that you can get these notifications for this fantastic lectures. A very good afternoon to you, Kush. Glad to see you once again in the class. Kaushal, same here for you. Alright, so let's move on to the next aspect, that is eligibility. Eligibility क्या है, कौन कौन avail कर सकता है? So now that we know that it's the street vendors, but उसमें भी तो कोई eligibility criteria होगा, the government ने set किया होगा, because naturally the government can't disburse loans just like that, because it's like cumulatively a huge amount that the government has to dispense. So what is the cutoff? So one is that those who were vending till 24th March 2020, and guys, you know that the significance of this day, 24 March 2020, the Prime Minister of the country, he appeared on the national television and he announced this lockdown for 21 days, and essentially after that it was extended further on, but उस time पे 21 दिन का था phase 1 में. So this is the date when the lockdown was announced. So 24th March 2020 is the cutoff. So those street vendors who were vending until 24 March on or before 2020, they can avail the benefit of the scheme. And the second eligibility criteria, there is another eligibility criteria, that only those vendors who have the certificate of vending. So there is something called certificate of vending or identity card. So those vendors who have certificate of vending or identity card issued by ULBs, urban local bodies, they are eligible to avail this loan. Then those street vendors that don't have the certificate of vending or identity card, but they are included in the survey that was conducted by the ULBs, they are also entitled, they can also apply. And those street vendors that are not even included in the survey, they can apply for this letter of recommendation. They can apply for this letter of recommendation to the ULBs, and the ULBs would grant this letter of recommendation, and they would also be entitled to apply for these loans. So I hope it is clear to you who are the people who are eligible for applying to these loans. What is the duration? The scheme is valid until March 2022. So abhi काफी time है, sufficient time है for those the street vendors who have not been able to apply for whatever reason so far, or who are not even aware who have not been contacted at the ground level, so they can apply for this scheme until March 2022 and restore their lost livelihoods. This is for the first time that the street vendors from peri-urban rural areas have become beneficiaries of an urban livelihood program. Now, this is a very important characteristic because this scheme has some of the first or some of the unique things. First time, the street vendors, not only from urban areas, they are included as a beneficiary, but also those street vendors that are in the peri-urban areas, जो semi-rural areas हैं, जो rural areas हैं, they would also effectively become the beneficiaries, because जो impact है वो हर किसी street vendor की life में almost same ही है. It doesn't vary because the section is essentially the same. It is the same. The target segment that is being impacted by the restrictions that followed the COVID-19 pandemic in the country, uski wajah se. So naturally everybody needs to be included in this scheme, and this is why the beneficiaries would include not only those street vendors who do street vending in urban areas, but also those who do this vending in peri-urban and rural areas as well. For the first time, MFIs, NBFCs, SSG banks have been allowed in a scheme for the urban poor due to their ground level presence. This is another first. So we have two firsts over here. So first time this, and first time that these microfinance institutions or NBFCs or self-help groups जो bank है ground level पे, they have been allowed to lend because they have this good presence at the ground level, grassroots level पे अच्छी presence रहती है. They are very close to street vendors, and as such they can be mobilized effectively so that the street vendors get access to credit, so that it doesn't just remain a scheme, just another scheme which was not very successful. And for this purpose, SIDBI has been made the implementation agency. Implementing agency is SIDBI. सो स्कीम लॉन्च किसने की है? मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ अर्बन एंड हाउसिंग अफेयर्स ने. बट कौन इसको इंप्लीमेंट कर रहा है आपको ये भी पता होना चाहिए. विच इज द अथॉरिटी, विच इज द एजेंसी और बॉडी दैट इज इंप्लीमेंटिंग दिस स्कीम, एंड दैट इज सिडबी, स्मॉल इंडस्ट्रीज डेवलपमेंट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया. ये एक तरीके से अश्योरेंस देती है इन बैंक्स को, MFIs, NBFCs, SHG बैंक्स को. सो दिस इज द काइंड ऑफ बैकिंग दैट इट गिव्स टू these various sorts of banks at the grassroots level, so that the scheme is successful. Then the interest subsidy part on timely early repayment of the loan, and interest subsidy of 7% per annum will be credited to the account of beneficiaries. अगर आप timely repayment कर देते हो और early repayment करते हो, you are kind of incentivized. So the government has put in this incentive part so that ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा repayment हो जाए loans का, which is 7% interest subsidy है, 7% per annum. This is the figure that you need to remember. In the exam they might ask you whether it's 5%, 3%, 8% or 10% or 7%. So now you know what exactly the figure is. And not only this, to further incentivize the street vendors and also to move towards this digital India, this agenda of the government, there is a provision of monthly cashback incentive on digital payment. So if they are making digital payment through Bheem UPI and through all those digital platform methods, the street vendors would be given this monthly cashback, which could be in the range of 50 to 100 rupees. So 50 से 100 रुपए तक का ये monthly cashback आपको मिलेगा अगर आप डिजिटल पेमेंट करते हो. सो द गवर्नमेंट वांट्स टू मेक श्योर कि डिजिटल पेमेंट हो, ज़्यादा ट्रांसपेरेंसी हो, ज़्यादा ईज हो, एंड द गवर्नमेंट, यू नो, द एजेंडा फॉर द लास्ट कपल ऑफ ईयर्स हैज बीन टू मूव इंडिया टुवर्ड्स अ डिजिटल इकोनॉमी. देन अनदर feature is that escalation of credit limit. So scheme provides for higher credit limit. There is a component that not only up to 10,000 you could get higher credit if you make timely payment or early repayment of loans, and you would be entitled for a higher amount, which could be in the range up to 20,000 rupees. So ये आपको जो ceiling है वो बढ़ जाती है लोन की. So you have this facility of availing of a higher credit amount if you are making timely or early repayment of your loan. So now you know what are the various facets related to this particular scheme. Guys, before moving forward, I just want to ask you, is there any doubt as of now, any question that you might have? And those of you who have just joined in, please go through the part that I have already covered after this lecture. And this happens to be a very important scheme for your UPSC exam, whether you are preparing for civil service exam or for EPFO. This scheme is very very important. गवर्नमेंट ने लॉन्च की है 1 जून 2020 को, और एग्जाम में आने के काफ़ी ज़्यादा चांसेस हैं, स्पेशली एज आई सेड दैट दीज डेज द गवर्नमेंट इज़ नॉट आस्किंग अबाउट स्कीम्स एंड पॉलिसीज वेरी वेरी सुपरफिशियली. काफ़ी डिटेल में जाके क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है, एग्जैक्टली जो फिगर्स हैं, फैक्ट्स हैं, इतना डेप्थ में जाके क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है. सो दैट इज़ वाई इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर यू टू बी एबल टू नो द nuances of this scheme, and this is what exactly we are doing. And guys, please do like the session and also subscribe to Gradeup IAS channel in case you haven't done so far. Alright, so let's talk about some of the latest facts. In fact, I got this fact from the website of SVAnidhi, this scheme. Another website has been made for this, and it's a very kind of user-friendly website. You can see all the facts and data. In fact, for the street vendors also, it shows stepwise ways as to how you can apply for the credit for availing the scheme, and also for receiving this letter of recommendation. तो हर चीज़ उसमें एक बहुत ही यूजर फ्रेंडली वेबसाइट बनाई गई है. एंड फैक्ट as per this latest fact and figures which was checked today on December 1, over 28 lakh loan applications have been received. So 28 lakh अभी तक loan applications have been received, and as I said in the beginning that approximately there are 50 to 60 lakh street vendors. So indeed this number is very very high, and which shows that the street vendors, they're aware about the existence of such a scheme, and the street vendors have been mobilized to apply for loans. So 28 lakh loan applications so far, out of which 15 lakh loans have been sanctioned. So sanction kitna ho gaya? 15 lakh loans, which is also a big number, there is no doubt, but there is no doubt that it could be much bigger than this. So abhi usme workout karne ki zarurat hai thoda. And how many loans have actually been dispersed? So far 1 million loans have actually been disbursed on the ground. So अभी जो actual beneficiaries हैं, जो recipient है ground में, 1 lakh street vendors हो गए हैं. Now let's talk about some of the challenges. So you see everything looks very nice so far, but are there any challenges that the street vendors might be facing on the ground? Yes, there are some hiccups that have to be ironed out yet. So one is that several banks are seeking applications on stamp papers worth ₹100 to ₹500. So applications, जो उनका लोन एप्लीकेशंस हैं, उस पर स्टैम्प पेपर्स जिसका जो लिमिट है 100 से 500 रुपए तक की, वो उनमें द बैंक्स आर डिमांडिंग दैट, विच इज obviously not required as per this scheme, and which is actually acting as this big hiccup on the ground, because already these people are poor. They have been, many of them, they have actually been pushed into poverty, और आप फिर उनसे डिमांड कर रहे हो कि इस अमाउंट का स्टैम्प पेपर्स उसमें लगाइए. सो इट फर्दर makes the process very complex, cumbersome, and also it pinches the pockets of those poor people who are already into the brink of poverty, or many of them actually are facing a lot of financial crisis as well. So this is the first impediment which needs to be sorted out, and communication need to be sent particularly to all these institutions and banks that are demanding this. The second hiccup is that there have been instances, obviously not too many instances like the first one, but there have been instances where the banks are seeking PAN cards, and these are poor people. These are basically marginal sections of the society that we are talking about, and most of them, they would not have PAN cards, right? So it's not fair to demand PAN cards from them. So some of the banks have been demanding and even checking the CIBIL score. So CIBIL is a credit score, it's a credit history, which is basically a 3-digit number which shows your credit history. So एक स्कोर होता है, ये क्रेडिट स्कोर 300 से 900 तक का, और जितना अगर आपका अच्छा स्कोर है, इफ यू आर क्लोजर to 900, your credit history would be very very credible, and the less the number is, that means your credit history is not very sound. And this is a way of checking out your reliability as a debtor, and many of the banks, or rather some of the banks, they are even checking the CIBIL or credit score, which is not fair for these vulnerable sections. Then we have the harassment cases. Some of the harassment cases, they have come into the picture. In fact, कई बार news में भी आता है, and this section has been badly impacted by the adverse consequences of lockdown. And when they are trying to restore their livelihood, the government is making the special push to give them the loan, so that loan से उनको दोबारा से अपनी livelihood revive कर सकें. और यहाँ पे harassment होता है उनको जब भी as vendors they come out in the open, and the municipal officials and the police officials, they say that you are basically contributing to COVID and you are basically making the population vulnerable. So वो activity को basically harass किया जाता है, which is something that should not be done at all. And this is a challenge that the state governments need to be very very specific about in dealing with. Alright, so what could be the way forward? What is the takeaway from this? It is that those challenges that we have just talked about, they need to be sorted out सबसे पहले. और दूसरा चीज़ ये है कि जो street vendors हैं, there is no doubt that it's a very vulnerable section, because इनके margins बहुत small रहते हैं, इनका जो amount होता है बहुत small रहता है. They don't have savings like the middle classes or the rich classes, and that is why many of them, they could be pushed into the brink of poverty. And to make sure that they are not pushed into poverty, the government has launched this scheme. There is no doubt that it's a very fantastic scheme, brilliantly conceptualized, but implementation remains a challenge. जो भी government schemes आती हैं, उसकी success या failure उसके conception से ज़्यादा उसके execution पे depend करता है. And this is why the relevant stakeholders, be it the government, be it the banks, be it the SIDBI or the ministries, they need to make sure that the implementation and execution on the ground is very very sound, so that the millions of street vendors, you know the figure I gave you in the beginning, 50 to 60 lakh or maybe even more than that, they benefit from the scheme, right? And I'm sure that this will happen in the coming time. So इसमें feedback mechanism की भी बहुत importance होती है इन सब schemes में, because naturally you want to make sure that you are not working being totally cut off from the ground level development. So feedback is also important from the street vendor themselves. Now coming back to the question that I asked you in the beginning, which of the following statements regarding PM SVAnidhi scheme is are correct? Now guys, you know the answer, it's B. So UPSC motivation, you said B, and this is absolutely right. B happens to be the correct statement, and one is incorrect. Actually there are two statements. The first one, scheme is a central sector scheme and fully funded by Ministry of Finance. So it is not Ministry of Finance. Anything that is related to loans or money might not necessarily be funded by Ministry of Finance. It could be some other ministry also, and in this particular case it is Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. और जैसा मैंने कहा, आपको ये भी याद रखना है कि SIDBI is the implementing agency. So SIDBI happens to be the implementing agency. But कौन सी ministry है? Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So this is naturally incorrect, and this statement, scheme is available to all street vendors engaged in vending in urban areas as on or before March 24, 2020. This is absolutely right. So this was the day when the Prime Minister of the country declared lockdown for 21 days, and this is exactly the cutoff day for being eligible for the scheme. So answer is B. Now guys, if you have any question, you can ask me. Otherwise, I have some important announcement for you. The announcement is that we have come up with something called Gradeup Super subscription plan, which provides you unlimited access to all structured courses and mock tests and also live courses. So we have this 11 plus structured live courses for you and 60 plus mock tests for you, and the subscription plan varies in duration from 24 months to 6 months depending upon your needs and necessities. You can avail of this fantastic opportunity. And we also have UPSC CSE 2021 preparation program, which is the daily affairs, current affairs, this component that we have live class at 9 p.m. Then we have daily editorial analysis, which we do. Then it is NCERT NIUS IGNU quiz, weekly PIB analysis, Gradeup Super quiz. And you know that I conduct this Gradeup Super quiz from Monday to Friday at 5 p.m. So this is also a very important aspect in your overall preparation for UPSC. These are some of the ongoing courses that we have right now. If you want to avail this Gradeup subscription super plan, then you can avail of all these fantastic courses that are going on right now. And guys, there are also some upcoming courses, a lot of them at no special or extra cost. So you have economic and social development, Indian and world geography, environment and ecology. So all these components you will get under this Gradeup Super subscription plan. And also we have something in the form of free series on Gradeup app, so you can download our app, and we have these various components: IS 2021, UPSC CSE Prelims 2020 subject-wise detailed analysis and solutions, daily editorial analysis, current affairs, UPSC CSE Prelims 2020 subject-wise detailed analysis. So a lot of these important components are there in Gradeup free series, and for that you will have to install the app, that is Gradeup app. Alright guys, so any questions? Okay guys, so please don't forget to like this video and also do share it with your friends, and also do subscribe to Gradeup IS channel. I'll see you another time. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye bye.